Mr. President, the omnibus spending bill that was enacted into law in December lifted the 40-year-old restriction on exporting U.S. oil overseas. During that debate, concerns were raised regarding the impacts that exporting American oil abroad could have on U.S. consumers and refined fuel prices, independent refineries, and other sectors of the U.S. economy, such as shipbuilding. However, the final language that became law did not include any requirement for analyzing and reporting on any potential impacts that exports could have on these industries or U.S. consumers. The Markey Amendment 2982 to the Energy Bill would create such a review. The amendment would require the GAO to review and report back annually for 3 years on the impacts of crude oil exports on U.S. consumers, independent refineries, shipbuilders, and energy production. The language of my amendment is language that is bipartisan. The language of my amendment is identical to language included in legislation sponsored by Chairman Mikulski. It is also identical to language included in legislation introduced by other senators. Exporting American crude oil could be a disaster for independent refineries in regions such as the East Coast. Upwards of 55% of our refining capacity on the East Coast could potentially close as a result of oil exports. The Energy Department has said that exports could lead to as much as a $9 billion smaller investment and 1.6 million barrels less refining capacity in 10 years. It could lead to up to $200 billion less revenue for the U.S. refining sector over the next decade. It could raise prices for consumers who are currently saving $700 a year at the pump and $500 a year on home heating oil this winter because of low prices. And it could harm U.S. shipbuilders. We have been having a shipbuilding renaissance in this country. We are currently seeing the biggest shipbuilding boom in 20 years, and it has been because of our increasing oil production and the Jones Act, which requires shipments between U.S. ports to be U.S.-built, flagged, and crewed ships. This means that producing more oil is leading to investment in U.S.-built ships to move that oil around the country. Right now, U.S. shipbuilders have orders to expand our domestic tanker fleet capable of transporting crude oil by 40%. Each oil tanker can represent an investment of $100 to $200 million. 5 years ago, there were 0 orders. Now, one company alone in Pennsylvania, Acker ASA, has nearly $1 billion in back orders and has tripled employment over the last 3 years. Exports could stop all of this in its tracks. So that GAO report is very important. I also want to compliment Chairman Mikulski and Ranking Member Cantwell for their excellent work in partnering to produce the legislation which we are considering out here on the floor. It represents bipartisanship in the way it is meant to operate. And towards that goal, I have an amendment that I'm going to speak to right now, which is one that Senator Cassidy from Louisiana and I have introduced, and it is an amendment to improve the way we are going to be selling oil from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Our nation's oil stockpile is supposed to be there to protect American consumers and our security in the event of an emergency.